I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land in which I record this podcast, the land of the Kabi Kabi peoples. I pay my respects to the traditional owners of country and their elders past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples listening today. Hi, Smart Community friends. In this episode of the Smart Community podcast, I have a really great conversation with Dr. Jessamyn Fairfield. Jessamyn is a lecturer in natural sciences at the University of Galway in Ireland. Jessamyn's work specialises in art-science collaboration with a focus on performing arts and thinking differently about how people can engage in science, technology and research. In this episode, Jessamyn tells us about Bright Club Ireland, a research comedy variety night, and We Built This City on Rock and Coal, an improvised climate change show touring rural Ireland. We talk about using dance theatre to explore concepts like particle wave duality and local ecologies. We finish our chat discussing the perception that changing data from graphs and equations is dumbing it down, and the importance of listening to audiences to discover if your message is actually getting across. As always, we hope you enjoy listening to this episode as much as we enjoyed making it. Oh, also a little heads up that we will be taking a few weeks break on the podcast over the Christmas New Year season. But we'll be back in January with more episodes in this PhD series of the podcast. So we'll see you then. Have a great break. Bye.
Welcome to the Smart Community. Smart regions, smart towns, and smart cities. It's where we live, work, and play. With smart communities, the future starts today. Big data, smart mobility, emerging trends galore. The Smart Community Podcast is what you're looking for.
Hello, Jessamyn. How are you today?
I'm good, thanks, Zoe. How are you?
I am fabulous. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. So thank you so much for coming onto the podcast.
Yeah, I've been really looking forward to it.
Amazing. Let's just jump straight in. And can you please introduce yourself and also tell us a little bit about your background and some of the work and projects that you are involved in?
Sure. So my name is Jessamyn Fairfield. I'm a lecturer in natural sciences at the University of Galway in Ireland. And the type of stuff that I do is like art science collaboration. So mainly focusing on performing arts and trying to think differently about how people can engage with science, technology, research, and kind of the broader societal impacts that can then result in. So some of the stuff that I've done in the past, for example, I ran Bright Club Ireland, which was a research comedy variety night in Ireland for about 10 years, where academics would learn to do stand-up about their research. And then we had really, really fun nights where the audience was very supportive of people trying out stand-up for the first time. But it was a really great way to, communicate research in kind of a different way that allows for maybe more lateral modes of thinking and something that's a bit fun as well. The two projects that I'm working on right now, one is called We Built This City on Rock and Coal, and it's an improvised show about climate change that has been touring rural Ireland for the last couple of years. So it's improvised partly because improv is really fun and I enjoy it a lot, but also because this is a way to effectively co-create the show with the audience. So asking them questions in advance about the climate crisis, having them fill in little slips of paper, and then the entire show, both like improv kind of comedy pieces and also little kind of science mini presentations, are all done in response to those prompts. So it's really like the local audience, the people that are there on the night that get to set what the show is about, which I find really cool and interesting, and is a bit more interactive than like us coming in and saying, here's what you need to know about. So that's been running for the last couple of years here in Ireland. And I'm also just starting a new project that'll be using dance theater to explore like local ecologies and climate change. So I'm working with this choreographer, Deidre Cavazzi, who's from Saddleback College in California. We've done two previous projects together with setting dance theater pieces around nanoscience and neuroscience to try to explore concepts kind of visually on stage using movement, using a bunch of theater tricks, but also fundamentally like the human body, dancing, movement, and choreography. And then, we've got this project now called Rooted, which has just kicked off, which is going to be looking at different lenses of the climate crisis. But we're also doing a bunch of sort of co-creation workshops at the beginning of that to, again, kind of say, well, maybe the issues that we want the pieces to be about should be dictated by the audience that we think is going to be there and the local communities. So as you can see, I really like performance. I really like live theater, comedy, improv, dance, all this kind of stuff. I think it has a really important function that it can play in terms of, what used to be called science communication and just getting people to engage with research topics and with data in a more kind of exciting and interesting way. But I also just really enjoy performance pieces for themselves as well. I think it's interesting that what you can learn from or about a data set by trying to interpret it through those lenses as well. I think there's a two-way exchange of knowledge that happens. So that was such a long answer.
No, I loved all of it. And I just went, okay, we're going to talk about this, and then this, and then this, and then this, and this as well. Thanks so much for sharing. Just for the audience, Jessamyn and I were in Antarctica together, and we had a great vibe, both comedians, and yeah, it was amazing. And Jessamyn ran my favorite part of the trip, which was the symposium at sea, where we all gave 3 minutes talk on ourselves, but I also loved that being the MC for something like that, you could have just not taken seriously and just been like, hey, here's the next person or whatever. But you stepped into the role of being MC, and it was, it really then brought that engagement piece that was really, I guess, necessary when there's whales and things and other paraphernalia.
There's a lot of excitement.
There's a lot of excitement, but also we were all very tired too. And so they were the ones that we wanted to go to, or people were sick or, whatever. And so I think bringing that energy was really valuable. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you so much for saying that. I mean, I know you are an experienced MC yourself. So, I mean, yeah, game recognized game, MCing is very important and sometimes underappreciated skill set. Especially when you as the MC also want to see whales.
Yeah.
No, I got a job to do here.
Yeah. That's, yeah. The whales. When just every now and then think, whale. Yeah. Anyway.
That's what I would like my life to be more like, to be honest with you.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, no whales out here. Actually very grey here at the moment, which for sunny Queensland is not on brand. Okay, back to this. I want to start with the researchers with stand-up comedy. So the listeners of this podcast will be, well, that could be anybody, who knows? But audience would be around, say, maybe local government, people interested in smart cities, but we'll have some different people. But they may not be familiar with the difference between stand-up and improv. So I want to kind of explore that a little bit, give us a bit of a 101. And how do we start? There's so many ways we can go. But I think let's start with stand-up and the researchers. How did you go about getting researchers interested in, I guess, performing their research in this way?
Yeah, well, it's interesting, right? Because at least here in Ireland, there's definitely a subculture of people who are very interested in public engagement and sign up for everything and do all the things. And I actually found that even within those kind of people who were quite keen to maybe get up and give a talk about the research, there was something about the comedy part that they were like, oh, but no, I wouldn't do that now. And I remember actually the very first Sprite Club that we ran in 2015, and it was Neve Shaw, who's a great friend of mine, who was running the training. And she was at the beginning, she's like, okay, guys, let's just go around the room and everybody talk about why you're here. And every single person was like, oh, Jessamyn twisted my arm. And I'm like, oh, no. But it was funny because in a way, right, if you become interested in doing stand-up comedy, some of it is about, your own voice and what you think is funny or interesting. But there is also a structure to it, and there's a structure that can be learned to some extent. So some of it was just talking to people, we would have training sessions with all of the researchers, and basically these kind of evolved over the course of the project with what we found effective. We would send on, some books and videos and stuff in advance. A lot of it was just thinking about, okay, what is the rough structure of an 8-minute stand-up set? Starting with something strong, ending with something strong, having chunks, not trying to squish too much in, knowing that if you successfully make the audience laugh, you then have to stop talking so they can finish that laugh. Like, don't just start talking again. But it's so hard. It's so easy to say that. And it's so hard when you're nervous in front of people to not just be like, but I have to remember the next thing that I was going to say. And it's like, no, like, let them into it. And even just, some of the more basic performance stuff too, of like, an audience won't laugh for you if they're scared for you. So just trying to put them at ease. And I think especially for anyone that's doing any sort of stand-up or any sort of comedy thing for the first time, like the audience has to feel that you're in control for them to feel comfortable enough to like let go and laugh. Just because you said something funny doesn't necessarily mean they're going to laugh. And they might be very much on your side and very much supporting you as a performer, but be a little bit scared for you. And then they just don't laugh as much. And that's like, just knowing that I think is really helpful, and knowing like, oh, I've got to project this confidence and that like I'm in control of the room, even if I'm not feeling it, so that they will then feel comfortable enough to laugh. But in terms of like the comedy part of it, the main advice that we always gave people was like, not necessarily trying to be funny, but trying to look for surprises in their research, something that someone in another field might not know, or like even just day-to-day stuff that might be surprising or weird, of like, I don't know, silly things that had happened, but not necessarily looking for like, I'm going to find some puns to say, or like, I've got to come up with something that's really, really, incredible and has like a laugh every 10 seconds. And it's like, no, you don't. Like, you just look for something that's interesting and surprising, tell it in an engaging way, and like, don't try to have a style of comedy that's not like you as a person, because audiences could just sense that. And like, if they sense that you're being inauthentic, again, they just won't laugh as much. They might still be sort of responsive, but just owning like your own style. And it's interesting though, because like over the years that Bright Club Ireland ran, I think we trained about like 300 plus academics, all different fields, all different career levels as well. And I mean, almost no like bad sets from anybody, like really, really strong. It was really nice to see people who initially might be quite nervous, like come out and be like so funny. And then you get to see them like soaking in that after their set and be like, I did a good job. And you're like, yes, you did. I told you you would. And it's just like so satisfying.
Yes. Oh, that's amazing. So the audience for that comedy, who was it? Was it peers, or was it community, or was it, other people?
Everybody. So they were public shows. And we did do some like audience surveys and stuff at the beginning just to try to find that out. And we found very, very broad age spread, very diverse audiences. As you might expect, like some people are there to support their friend. So you'd have like quite a few highly educated audience members, but also a lot of people who weren't necessarily, or who were maybe still in their studies, or, just from the community at large, and effectively like wanted to go to something that's like TED Talks, but funnier, which is great. I did eventually stop doing audience surveys because I just really don't like giving someone that's come to a gig homework. Like,
Yes.
hey, would you fill in this quick thing? Is something that was never welcomed by anyone. So eventually I was like, I feel like we know who the audience is. We're going to stop asking them. But it was nice too to see like, even, and I know like you're sort of on the comedy circuit as well, like compared to the standard comedy circuit audience, it was more diverse in lots of ways, which I really appreciated. Because it's just like how nice a comedy night is to be in depends so much on the audience. So having a really, really sound bunch of people in was like such an important part of it, I think.
Yeah, no, that's so nice. And yeah, totally appreciate. I was thinking about me handing out surveys in if I had just stand up gig. Oh, what did you think about? Did you collect any data before and after, other than where people came from?
So we did a few things. We did all post-event surveys, and there was a lot of stuff around like, basic demographic information, but also like what type of content people were there to see, how important the different pieces of like sort of science, social science, arts, but then like just comedy itself were to them. And that was one thing that came out of it, was that it was really important that it was interdisciplinary. I knew other people that were running like science comedy nights in other places. And like just personally, that never appealed to me as much as something very interdisciplinary where like every type of person is present. And I guess maybe predictably, like that's the audience that then this attracted, is people who are like, yeah, great. I came here to support my friend who's in psychology, but now I'm hearing about like geology and medieval manuscripts or whatever. And then, yeah, we actually did a bunch of interviews and stuff, some with the audience, but also with like the performers afterward, to see the impact that it had on them, trying to write stand-up comedy about their work. and actually like published a paper that I'm really proud of on that around the impact on effectively their sense of self-determination. You know, when you're an academic and you're talking about your research, you're often encouraged to have this very like pretend objective viewpoint about it, like that everything is, you know, the work was done and like you're not a human being in that process. But writing comedy, I mean, it helps a lot to have a point of view and also to admit, like, yes, I am the researcher, but I am also a person and I also have a perspective and like stuff that I like and stuff that I dislike. And for a lot of people, it was really important getting to talk about their research in a way that also included like their humanity, which is maybe not surprising, but it was nice to get like the data to show that that was true.
Yeah, I was just making a note to get that link to your paper. That would be amazing to read. Yeah, I mean, and also I was thinking about as a researcher, me being a human, it has to. Well, I was just going to say it has to go to the side, but no, it doesn't. I still am a human in the research, and there's things that I like about my research. There's things that I'm like slogging, and we were just talking about my systematic literature review, baby. You know, whereas like looking at cool data visualizations, yeah, I could do that all day. But also then sometimes no, I couldn't. I need to get away from the damn screen. Yeah, and so. And I think the different mediums is a really and again, I hadn't actually. I mean, I kind of tried to weave in comedy to my PhD originally, but then I was like, nah, Zoe, just relax. And that's when I kind of was just started to first think about my PhD. And so anyway, it was like a time where it was just it felt like I was just trying to jam all the things I do together, but actually. I think it is a medium for data storytelling. And yeah, you've given me some inspiration to look at that side of things as well. Yeah, so thanks. Very self-indulgent, actually. Okay, so I really like what you said about actually quite earlier, you were talking about the process being just as important, and make sure I'm not putting words in your mouth here. The process being just as important as like the outcome of the piece, whether it's the performance piece or the stand-up piece. And we will go to those other projects you were talking about earlier, but talk a little bit about that process. You have already, but why is that so important, or what things did you learn when you were going through this process?
Well, you know what's funny, I think I've kind of always felt this way, that like, I don't know, are you familiar with like Bloom's taxonomy of like different ways of teaching? And there's kind of like regurgitating knowledge, and then there's like evaluating different types of knowledge, and, you know, like critically engaging that stuff. And then at the top, like, is like creating new content based on the thing that you're learning. And I definitely always felt like the moment when I understood something well is when I could actually then make jokes about it or like write little parody songs or just like that's for me, the moment of understanding is like being able to then generate something that is like silly and a reversal or whatever of whatever the thing is that I'm learning. And I remember, it's probably insufferable, but like I remember in college, like doing my little joke things about quantum mechanics and being like, now I get it. And it's just like, this is not anything that my classmates were doing. But I think that it is interesting, right? Because initially when you're learning stuff or you're engaging with something, there's the process that we're learning about, right? And like in science, you talk about, you're not learning like the set of facts, you're learning the process of science of like having a hypothesis, testing it, you know, feedback loops, trying to come up with like the best understanding of a concept, which might not be like the permanent best, but is like the best we can do at any given time. And like, that's all great. And I love that process. But then I think just for me, there's like that additional thing that happens when you can be like, okay, and like, now, how would that work if they were all squirrels? Or like, what would happen if we were doing this on a different planet? Like just the sometimes totally absurd, like, well, what if, and then also this. I've always really enjoyed that. And I think it's something that I enjoy, you know, in terms of comedy and in terms of like also coaching people to come up with comedy based on the research of like how to take that and like twist it or like flip it in an unexpected way. But also like my collaboration with Deidre, the choreographer, of just like, okay, how does that look like if it's people moving around a room? And like, how does it change when we're thinking about this physically instead of like words or even like images or equations or whatever on a page. And it's just, I feel like you learn so much from doing that on top of what other people can explain to you about the thing. And it's for me, maybe I'm also like more of an experiential learner. Like when I'm playing board games or whatever, at some point I'm like, just stop reading the rules. Like, let me play a first game and really mess up. Like, I need to just do it. Okay, yeah, you're reading me page 10 of the rules. Let's stop and just assume that I will get these wrong. But like, I just need to do it. And I think that's also where I'm like, okay, yes, this has all been explained to me. I've done my little problem sets or whatever. Now, like, let me mess around with it, please.
Yeah, I really like that. And I think the understanding some like writing comedy about it as a way to understand it, or by understanding it you can write comedy about it, or perform it or explain it to somebody or whatever in a different way, I think is really powerful. And I hadn't really again thought about it like that. And like, I guess being able to tell stories, not just spurt out facts about, oh well, this is what the thing does. Yeah. And being then, like you said, shifting, okay, so this is what it is in reality, but what if we shifted this? Then what would it mean? You really have to understand the real core of it to be able to then, if you're on another planet, or you shift the physical structure of it, or you do whatever. And I think then also when you start writing comedy about something, when I start writing something, I'm like, oh, but if I said this, is everyone going to get it like that? And if they don't, what else do I need to say in as few words as possible to make sure that they get it? Or maybe this thing is just not funny. It was funny to me at the time or whatever, but no one else gets it. And I when I first started comedy, I thought, oh well, I have to be really smart, and I have to like write all these really clever jokes or whatever. But then I watch some of the people that I love and that I laugh at, and they are saying very mundane things, but the way they're saying it, the way they framed it, the surprise, you talked about surprise earlier, that is so important. And also in my research in data visualization and storytelling, which again, when you think about it, makes perfect sense, but surprise is one of the key elements to remembering something, or like wanting to find out a little bit more. But I think it was the recall, if it's a surprising, whereas if we just read the same thing that we've heard before, it's not, we just kind of just goes in the back of the bank or whatever.
I used to always think of it in terms of like like shower or pub facts, like the thing that you can't stop thinking about and that you feel like compelled to just tell everybody, like once you learn it, or you're like in the shower later being like, how does that even work? Like, and one of my favorite examples of this is, I don't know if you know this fact already, but that like pigeons produce milk.
Oh no,
they produce milk from like the little like crop thing over their beaks. Like that's where their milk comes out to feed their babies. And I both find that really horrifying. Why I'm just like, pigeon, what are you doing? But also like the milk is extremely nutritious. Like it has a higher fat and protein content than human milk. So arguably that's what we should be doing, like as a supplement. But like, this is just like pigeon milk. Like it is such a compelling, I don't know, image concept. And it's like, not all of us are blessed enough to be researching pigeon milk in terms of like communicating it. But like, where do you find like the thing that just grabs people so that like, weeks later, they're just like, hey, I learned this thing and I want to tell you about it. And it's pigeon milk.
My God, there's so much that I could say about pigeon milk. But also you never see pigeon babies. Where are these babies?
Right?
Tell me.
I mean, there's somewhere
where are they?
Getting milk. I don't
know. So the shower fact thing you think about, the pub fact, the pub, you tell people about it. Is that?
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Like the thing that sticks with you, and the thing that sticks with you enough that you're like compulsively telling everybody around you.
Yeah, right.
And like, what else could we wish for in terms of communicating ideas, really?
Yes. Love that. Okay, so let's go to the improv. So you're having a show, and I want to know what compelled you to do it, and I guess what your objective and what impact were you hoping to have. Oh, but also you need to explain improv to people because they will not They may not know.
Oh, improv is amazing. I'll try not to sound like I'm in a cult here. But it's interesting because basically where the show came from is that myself and Katie Shute, who's another improviser that I know based in the UK, we both did this art science residency that was basically like looking at climate change and trying to think about different creative approaches to communicating it and engaging different communities with it. And we kind of got together. We weren't on the same residency, but on different ones. And we said, is there a way that improv could contribute to this? And, improv is basically taking a show and making it up from scratch in front of people, right? So it's all improvised. It's made up on the spot. A lot of people are familiar with it from TV shows like Whose Line Is It Anyway, which would be kind of shorter improv where there might be like a game, like, every line has to be a question, or like you have to sing every line of this scene. But you're generally drawing from like audience suggestions or something that is taken from the audience in the room to show that it's made up. And I think the thing that I love about it is that there's almost no other forms of creativity where like you're watching the creative process happen in front of you as well as the final outcome. You go to see a play and it's wonderful, right? But like it was written beforehand, it's been practiced a lot. They've made a bunch of decisions about like the lighting and the set and all these things. Like you are seeing this very polished end thing, which again is amazing. And even like stand-up, right? Like stand-up is interesting because you're still seeing a very polished thing a lot of the time, but like there's this sort of premise in stand-up of trying to make it sound like it's something that person thought up on the spot. And to me, that's one of the real difficult, like artistic things in stand-up is making that feel authentic of like, it's just someone telling you their thoughts, but it's like they have really honed how exactly to say these things and what exact wording to use to get the most reaction out of an audience. And that is like so difficult actually. But then improv, just none of that, right? Improv is like, you're seeing it made up on the spot in front of you. And it's interesting because it can be very funny. Like it has kind of an electricness that I think is hard to find in a lot of other, performance pieces. But there's also the sense of being on a high wire because of course it could go horrifically wrong at any moment and you don't know what's going to happen. So Katie and I kind of felt that improv would be a really nice way to potentially like effectively start conversations about climate change and the climate crisis in communities, not necessarily come in like offering solutions, but try to get people to think about what the solutions might look like where they are, which they are going to be the best place to answer. So we had, stage improvisers, but then we also had like scientists who would come along who had basically agreed to give little monologues about science of whatever sort of came up. Which is actually quite a tall ask if you think about it. And we worked with a really amazing like environmental scientist, Geisha Kinderman, who's one of my colleagues at the University of Galway, who did such a good job with that. But just like also a little bit taking out the feeling that a lot of people have with the climate crisis of like, I have to know everything or I can't make the right choice. And being like, hey, even the experts don't actually know everything. Like we're all doing the best we can. And we're all trying to figure out how to like live ethically in this world. But I think one thing that came out of it as we did more and more shows was actually making space for like the emotional aspect of that, right? Because like if climate change and the climate crisis were just about communicating the facts and then we act on them, like it'd be sorted. We know the facts. Like there's some nuance, yes, but like we broadly know what we're supposed to be doing and we're broadly not doing it. So having a bit of space in these shows for people to actually feel the way that they feel about that, I think was really important. And just to give you an example, right? So in every show, we had these little slips of paper that we would hand out and we get people to write stuff down in advance. And then we're like pulling these lines from a box, reading them out, and then doing improv based on them. So I have one that I wanted to just read here.
Yes.
You can just imagine trying to do comedy after this. But the question is, what makes climate change hard for you to talk about? The answer, which is very long, is the suggestions that us Joe Schmoes can suggest to each other get scoffed at by friends who say, why bother when big oil companies or massive amounts into the atmosphere or other massive industries are killing our planet, making our efforts seem pathetic and insignificant. And it's like, great, ha ha ha. So this is good jokes.
Yeah, that's tough.
It's how people feel, right? That is like the core of what is hard about this. And so like using improv to try to play with that and either be like, why are these big oil companies doing this? How do we go on in the face of like existential despair when it's like, oh, there's these big companies doing whatever, and I'm like recycling my little cans or whatever I can actually do. Like actually making space to say that and to be like, yeah, it is easy to feel insignificant and it is easy to feel like you don't have agency. But then like having this show, which both explores those themes, and then like the show is literally giving the audience agency because they are determining the direction of the show. And so basically Katie and I came up with the concept. We were very fortunate to get funding for like a pilot show from ICRAG, which is the Geoscience Center, research center here in Ireland. And then we kind of leveraged that to get funding from this really wonderful, actually, grant scheme, the Creative Climate Action Initiative run by Creative Ireland, who have funded all sorts of like really interesting artistic approaches to talking about the climate crisis. And then we're fortunate this year to be funded by Research Ireland, which is cool because we're both doing more shows and we're trying to leverage like these pieces of paper and the information that people give us into something like a policy brief on rural places in Ireland and the kind of things that they are worried about, because it is a specific demographic and a specific set of concerns compared to people that live in cities. And I now live in a city, but I grew up in not a city. And I remember how it feels when it's like everyone is making decisions about me and I'm not even asked my opinion. And I think too, we've done like 30 of these. We built the City on Rock and Coal shows. So we basically have this huge body now of just people's written suggestions, which are very honest and very interesting. So it's like, how can we honor those by also kind of trying to feed them up the chain?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's data, right? It's collecting data.
Yeah. Data storytelling is the answer.
Storytelling is the answer to everything. Excellent. Tink. No, I love that. And also it gets people to engage in the topic in a way, and give you this data in a way that doesn't feel like they're, just part of some engagement survey or whatever, another one that doesn't do anything.
Kind of survey fatigue thing, right? Or like
what is it?
Things where it's like, oh, you're asking us, but you're not going to do anything with this. Like this doesn't actually matter. And it's like, no, actually, what you're writing down matters hugely to us here in this room, but also we are going to do our very best to like spread the word as much as we possibly can. And I think that's the thing too. Like I go on a whole, like, how do you engage different types of communities rant as well. But it's like very similar to so many things, and that it's actually just listening to people, like considering your audience, listening to people and listening to the things that they care about. And those might not be the things that you thought they would care about, but just ask them. Just ask them.
Yep. Yeah. And I guess also listening doesn't mean you have to come back with a solution straight away too. And I think that's what people are scared of. Oh, but what if they say, we need this? Well, then you listen and like it's, it may seem impossible at the time that you could actually solve that. But I think little incremental changes and believing that it's possible and then doing things, that go work towards that. Yeah. It can be really powerful.
Yeah. I think just making space for those conversations, right? In the same way that like if a friend is having a tough time and you're just like, well, what you should do is this, this, and this. It's like that friend will not talk to you the next time they're having a tough time, or like the solution thing versus like, making space to have the feelings about it and to recognize that we don't have to have the solutions. I think also just like connecting people in communities that have similar concerns, right? Because that was something that a good few people said to us at shows was they kind of said, well, I can feel isolated in my community being worried about these things. But actually, it's also like, well, who else showed up tonight? Like, do you talk to these guys about this stuff on a regular basis? And just identifying that, like, no, actually, you're not like the one weirdo who's the only person that cares about this stuff. Like, there is a community. And that was one trend, actually, that we saw coming out of the limited data analysis that we've done on these slips of paper. But like, we kind of classified some of the worries about climate change based on this paper that had like 7 sort of climate anxiety classifications. And the biggest one in our audiences was worry that societal response is not enough. So it wasn't actually some of the more, like loss of livelihood or like threats to the physical environment. It was like, yeah, we know about all of those, but actually the real fear is that like not enough people care. And so just showing that, well, maybe it's not everybody. And thankfully, Ireland doesn't have as many issues with climate change deniers as, for example, my original country of the US did and does. But like, yeah, here are the people in your community that care, like connect with them, talk to them, connect with people in other communities. And that can help make it easier to just keep going and keep working on stuff and keep making, the right decision one day after the next.
And then, you started that analysis, and then the idea is to put it into a brief, did you say, to say policymakers?
Yeah, so basically it's going into a policy brief and it's also going into an academic paper. It's funny because like I'm an academic. I feel like most academic papers are read by like 5 people, and it's so much work to do. And then paywalls and like academic publishing is a scam. We'll circle back on that. like it's interesting because I've always felt that like these kind of public facing events and like getting people actually in the same room to talk about stuff is so effective and so much more effective than like writing a ridiculous thing that 5 people read. But then also, yeah, this is kind of my first foray into the policy space, which I think you have some more experience than I do. I should be asking you for advice here.
Good chat.
But like how to get people to then like use this information that we're collecting as a basis for possible future decisions. And it's interesting because at least in Ireland, right, like there are parts of the government that are doing a lot of rural consultations. It's not like this is a totally unmapped space, but at the same time, the nature of answers that you get from people when you're like a representative of the government and you're there and you're doing like some sort of town hall thing and someone's like, well, in terms of my dog, and you're like, oh no. Versus like it's a comedy show, they're getting a chance to write stuff down. And so they have a chance to kind of think about what they're putting in, but also like the improvisers are not a source of authority, right? Like there's no like speak truth to power that can be inferred by telling an improviser that like big oil is bad or whatever. And so you kind of take out some of the perceived power dynamics from it as well, which doesn't mean that you can't get very genuine critiques of authority, but it means that there's a bit less like reactionary stuff because that like, this cast of improvisers is not going to go and fix the train schedule for your rural community. Like, sadly, that was requested. It is outside of scope. Like, getting people to engage in a slightly less fraught way and a little bit more laterally, I think you get a lot of honesty and some different stuff comes out compared to a big public consultation from the government.
Yeah, there's so much in what you've just said there as well, and particularly around the power structures, because that's coming out too in my research around like, seeing visualizations from a god-like view, whereas when you improv, which I don't know, haven't really, again, when you look at it, you're like, and particularly like when you're looking down on something, you've got your axis and the dots are moving around or whatever, whereas like a bar chart, you're looking at it. And like a lot of like maps in particular are god-like views, and I guess the patriarchy and things are like there's looking at data feminism and things like that as well. So it's all very interesting. But so cool. What you've just kind of unpacked there is from from a performance perspective, it's very it's as the audience member, you're I mean, I guess you might be on a stage, but like it's much more like part of it, and particularly improv. Yeah, you're definitely part of stand up a little bit less because you're again, you're alluding to that you've just told the audience this and that they are part of it, but actually you've got this pretty well. I mean, some people do a lot of crowd work and like
it's interesting, right? Yeah, there's different degrees of it, I suppose, and there's certainly different degrees of it within improv as well in terms of like audience involvement. But I do think, I remember reading a thing, this was like way back when I first started improv. I did like a master's thesis about improv. And it talked about like improv as, of course I did, like a uniquely sort of liminal space because the actors are coming in and even stuff like, their socioeconomic status, like their gender, like a lot of stuff just gets dropped so that everyone is on the same level coming in as a blank slate on a stage that has nothing. And then you're able to build up from there. So like you can play a lot more with status and with hierarchies. You can subvert them, which, other forms of comedy do as well, of course. But it's really interesting. And even like, not to like super nerd out about this too much, but like theater of the oppressed, right? And using like improv and audience participation to then get people to explore social issues, like, but challenging hierarchies and challenging, patriarchy, like racism, colonialism, like a lot of stuff that to me, comedy as a whole, part of its function should be to unpack that. But of course, unfortunately, you can also often get laughs by just like restating tropes. So not all comedians are doing that. And for me, though,
Sometimes
that's
they're
the thing
doing
that's
the opposite.
really,
Yeah, the opposite, like you said.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the thing, though, that's super interesting to me about improv as a tool in these like societal change spaces is like, yeah, giving the audience that agency, trying to give them as much of it as you can while not like totally derailing a show that is supposed to be fun and have some sort of an arc. But yeah, like the liminality of like, well, actually the actors also don't know what's going to happen. Like this is uncharted territory for everyone, kind of like the climate crisis. So
Mm. Wow,
yeah.
what an arc. What a drawback. Callback,
Mm,
something. No, what's the word?
what a
Metaphor,
drawbridge.
analogy. What a drawbridge. Yes, that is the word. Um, I'm just looking at the time because time, what is time? Really?
We could talk forever.
We could talk forever, but there's a couple of things that I do want to talk to you about. Uh, what a weird way to say that. There's a couple of other things that I want to touch on. So, um,
Mhm.
if you've got time, one is the
I do.
last project that we talked about that you were telling us about, and then I'd also, if there's any other impactful data visualizations or stories that you want to bring into this convo as well, before we then kind of wrap up. So. Let's go to your last project, which is the one you're currently working on. Is that?
Yeah, so this is basically in development right now. This is this dance project rooted. I'm working with an amazing choreographer, Deidre Pavazzi, and basically we're coming up with a new dance theater piece that's going to be exploring like local ecologies, how they're changing, and how that ties into climate change and the climate crisis. It's obviously like we've only just started, so there's less that I can say about it. But what our process has been on previous projects is that we'll sort of pick a topic together. Initially, we worked on nanoscience, which was like my lab research area before I fully transitioned into public engagement research. And then we also did one on like neuroscience and the brain as a circuit. We'll do like a kind of intense research and chats to experts kind of period, and then start putting together as a duo this like a dance theater piece that would have several sections, you know, different musical choices, but also like using microscopy or other research images as part of the staging. So like when we did our piece on nanoscience, like she used electron microscopy images that I had taken of different nanostructured materials. We did some cool stuff around like neurons and like basically cell signals being sent along like effectively like wires in the brain, things like that, and trying to integrate it all into a theater experience that people can enjoy. And one thing that I love about working with Deidre too is she's like the most inclusive choreographer in the world. So she'll hold like auditions, but like everybody gets in and then she choreographs things based on what people can do and what they want to do. And the first project that we did together, there was like a guy that just was in the show because he came to the wrong room for the audition. He came in and he's just like, hey, is this the like auditions for the African gospel choir? And she's like, no, but you should stay. And here's why. And then that man did his first dance theater show and he loved it. And it was really, really cool. Yeah. But it's just like, especially for kind of arcane concepts, like I remember in the nanoscience piece, we had a section that was about like particle wave duality. I think I have like a background in dance. I'm not an amazing dancer, but like I was in some of the sections as well. And I really, really enjoyed it. But it was just like finding physical movements, finding like uses of light. Like she did a bunch of stuff with handheld lights as well, that then can convey this kind of difficult to articulate concept that everything is both a particle and a wave, which still takes quite a lot of talking to get physics students through every year. Mm-hmm. So like, it's kind of it's a little bit different from the, you know, stand-up and improv comedy stuff, but along the same veins really of like what are these lateral ways of visualizing these concepts, and especially like the dance piece ties into it, but I think the other stuff does as well. If we want people to think about concepts, especially concepts that might be like difficult or challenging or like emotionally laden, a really good way to do that can be tying into like artistic traditions that people are more familiar and comfortable with. So like here in Ireland, there's so much performance, but especially like storytelling, just like storytelling events are a huge thing. I mean, comedy is a huge thing. Here in Galway, there's like an incredible theater community, even though it's like a smaller city. So having events that are those kind of thing, but also about like science or about these like socially difficult issues like the climate crisis is more accessible than like, hey, do you want to come to a free public lecture about how we're all not doing enough? It's like there's a type of person that will go to a free public lecture, and I am that person, so I can't criticize too much. But like that's a very small subset of people. Who else will come to different things, and what will they get from it, right? Like how not just how do we get concepts across and how do we like engage people with different research ideas, but like can that drive any sort of behavior or policy change, rather than just being like talking to yourself. I hope there's an answer to that.
Yeah, no, totally. Because I was even thinking as you were talking there around storytelling as even being the doorway to get people to even consider engaging with a topic. And that is, and like it can be, you know, it could be visual, it could be theatre, whatever the case is, or maybe they go without knowing what the topic is, or, you know, like, I don't know. It was, it's also like it has these kind of, maybe it's the objective that you want to give more information or or get them to do something. But actually, even just telling the story is valuable because then it will bring people in that wouldn't necessarily engage with the topic because of all those reasons you gave. But also perhaps it's not on their radar as well because there's so many other things to think about too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so let's go to any other impactful data visualizations or stories that have left an impression on you.
I have a funny example for this because I was trying to think of like something really impactful, but also that isn't something that I did, right? Like I don't want to toot my own horn here. But are you familiar with the genre of photo that is woman laughing while eating salad?
Yes, I am.
So me too. And like I had read, I don't know, like feminist critique of it basically that was like, what does this say about like about thinness culture, about how everything is supposed to be enjoyable, about like women being asked to like perform sort of happiness at the drop of a hat. I had read all of this stuff and was like, yeah, that's why like this specific thing bothers me so much. And then because like before we started recording, we were talking about the Edinburgh Fringe, right? And the weird and wonderful experiences that one can have there. I saw this show. It was like a feminist circus show at the Edinburgh Fringe. This was probably like 2016 or 2017. And it had all these different pieces in it. It was kind of like physical theater, but also like dance and movement. And there were some like kind of skits. It was great. It was so interesting. And this periodic, like almost chorus in it was this woman who was increasingly like unhinged over the course of the show, who would just come on stage with like a bowl of salad and just kind of like laugh in this really like upsetting way, like, ha ha, ha, and, like throw a salad into the air and then walk off stage. And like the first time it happened, it was kind of jarring and it was like, oh, like I see what this is. Okay, yeah. And then every subsequent time it just heightened. It got more and more and more. The way that she laughed and threw the salad became more and more like extreme, but also like performative and upsetting. And by the end, I was just like, this is the best commentary that I've ever seen on woman laughing with salad. And part of it is that it was embodied, that it was there, but also like that repetition, the way that it just got more and bigger and like very too much. Oh, circus woman laughing with salad.
Oh my God. That sounds hilarious, but amazing.
It was like, I'm laughing. Also, I'm thinking a lot about salad now. And also, weirdly, I want a salad. Am I the patriarchy? Like, so much to unpack.
Yeah, I really like that. And I also, what I like about that is when you can, and comedy does this well, when you can talk about this thing without explicitly, particularly if there's like a known thing, if you can explicitly, if we have a collective kind of, because some people may not have seen that, but they would just go, oh, there's this crazy lady with the salad. But we understand this concept, which is a meme, and like there's other ones as a collective, and that's really interesting as well. And then, but we also, the fact that we understand how like what it says about, how problematic it is, but we're kind of like using it ironically as well. And so,
exactly.
yeah, I don't know, there's something in that. It's,
There's layers. There's
there's
upon
so
layers.
many layers. Well, thank you for sharing that. We'll have to put the link in the show notes so people can, if they do not know woman smiling with salad or smiling
We
woman
gotta
with
get
salad,
that out
happy
there.
lady with salad. Yep.
Mhm.
Thanks so much for sharing that. What's the time? Okay, I want to ask you one question before another question.
Great. That's a podcast, right?
Challenges. I want to finish on challenges, and then we go to suggestions for listeners. So, I guess, yeah, it's a huge question, but some of those key challenges you have to overcome when you are doing this like storytelling, and particularly when it's data storytelling, right? And you'd have, I guess, unique ones, but also I think one from a performance perspective, but I think from a data visualization and storytelling perspective, they won't necessarily all be unique. They'll be common across different mediums.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think that the main challenge that I've faced with a lot of this kind of stuff has been the perception that, like, if you change data in any way from like a set of graphs and equations and whatever, that you are like dumbing it down, or that it's like science light, or like this kind of stuff. And obviously, like, there's this temptation when it's like, oh, it's comedy about research, and like, oh, you're making a joke of research. It's like, no, that's not what it is. But I think I found that with definitely almost any kind of like engagement work, or a lot of storytelling, it's a increasingly small minority of people, but there can be this, vocal minority that's like, well, that's not real science, or like, that's just for kids. That's not. And it's like, no, actually, there's like a huge body of literature around how people understand concepts, how visualizations and storytelling and like different modes of engagement help, and how it helps different groups in different ways, right? That like not all audiences are a monolith. So we have to think about how the same thing can be interpreted in a bunch of different ways. Like, it makes me super mad because there is a big body of literature around it, and then you'll see like actual academics being like, well, that's not anything. And it's like, no, man, you can't just say like, I don't believe in the scientific validity of this. Like, if you said, I don't believe in magnets, you'd be like laughed out of the physics department. But if you say like, oh, I don't think that this is anything, somehow that's still acceptable. Mm-hmm. So that would be my main challenge, that I think, I don't know, earlier in my career, I spent more time trying to engage with people who had those views and be like, well, no, actually, it's a legitimate thing, and this is really important, and here's why. And at this point in my career, I'm a little bit like, oh, is that how you feel? Then it's not worth talking to you anymore. Because I like talking to people who share my values, even if we don't agree, but who understand like what we're doing here on this planet. That got very direct, but it is the main challenge that I faced, which I think I'm still working on my approach to.
Yeah, and I think we only have a limited amount of like, bandwidth that we can use to process this kind of situation, right? So it's like it's not ignoring it, but it's like, well, let the data speak for itself when we're doing all these things, but also that that purist kind of view that this is the way we've always done it. It doesn't, like, we can learn from what we've done previously, and then we need to keep changing and adapting because, hey, we still got the problems, right?
Well, exactly. And it's like, okay, if we know that what we're doing isn't working, then what can we change? And especially from like an equity perspective, like, who is that leaving out is very, very important, especially on things like climate change that do not have an equal distribution of who they impact. Yeah,
absolutely. And I also think we should have fun in this life that we have.
Oh my God, yes.
So like, when people are like, why are you doing that?
Time. There's no time for haters.
Yeah, exactly. And people are like, oh, why are you going to strike? I'm like, because I want to, and it's going to be fun, whatever. Or, oh, why are you doing it like that? Why, it's like, well, I want to have fun at the same time as making an impact,
Yeah, exactly. It's like, why use comedy for this stuff? Because it's extremely enjoyable and effective, but also enjoyable.
Yeah, exactly. Well, any suggestions then for listeners to use data storytelling in their life or their work or their life or both?
My main suggestions are just listening. And so I think especially like, and I've had to kind of face up to this in some of my projects, but like listening to where are you telling the story and is it the story you think that you meant to tell? So just like actually talking to, potential audiences or like anticipated audiences for your stuff and being like, did this get across the message that I want it to have? And like that was really important for us we built the city on rock and coal. We did some like tour focus groups basically and talked with some communities about things that they wanted, things that were important to them. And it was interesting actually because like my university wanted to do like a citizen science thing as part of it. That sounded like a good idea. And then we went out and talked to people and we're like, hey, if we could like send you a device or something that recorded something and that was useful for climate change. And they're like, no, we don't care about that. Like, let us tell our stories, let us share them, let us find community with each other. Like that is what we want. And it totally changed the trajectory of that project. And it changed the like sort of citizen involvement piece that we were planning to be something that was more based around story as well and finding community. And I think just being open to, I want people to engage with this data or with these ideas in this way. And then is that actually working? And then be prepared to pivot if the answer is no, or if the answer is yes for this audience, but not for this other one, which is also important to me.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And it goes back to looping all the way back, drawbridge moment to
Drawbridge moment.
Now I've forgotten what we looped back to. The process. The process being just as important as the outcome. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And like the process is kind of all we have. So it has to be rewarding and it has to be inclusive and you have to keep growing and changing so the process gets better and better.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a perfect way to leave this. Oh, sad though, to end this interview and say a massive thank you, Jessamyn, for coming onto the podcast and importing data into my research, but also having this conversation has been amazing. So thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me. It's been a real joy and I love everything that you're doing. Please keep doing it.
I guess I could try. I also love all the things you're doing, and we're going to definitely have another conversation after this. So, we'll sort that out right now. But we'll talk soon. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks so much for listening to the Smart Community Podcast. You can find the show notes for this episode and all other episodes at zoeether.com/podcast. That's ZOEATHER.com/podcast. Have you got a question for me or one of our guests? We'd love to hear from you. Just shoot us an email at hello@mysmart.community. If you enjoyed the show, make sure you follow the podcast wherever you listen and connect with us on LinkedIn too. And hey, ratings and reviews are always welcome. They help more smart humans just like you find the show. As always, we hope you enjoyed listening to this episode as much as we enjoyed making it.